Hello my fellow whale watchers and welcome to the first episode of War Robots Basics. The idea of this format is to teach relatively new players some important fundamentals of the game, also because many of you tend to ask me similar questions, so this is an idea that I have had for a while now. One of the issues that this game has is that it changes all the time. Elements are added, removed, introduced, nerfed or buffed. So for this reason, I will make an effort to teach fundamental principles instead of showing or explaining particular gear or specific items of the game. But as always, it takes some time and effort of producing such videos, so how many episodes will come and which topics will follow on this one? As always, it will mostly depend on your feedback and the number of views that this video gets, so thanks for sharing your thoughts. You will have a say in whether or how this is continued. One of the most frequent types of questions that I get is, how should I set up my hangar in War Robots? What's the best choice of robots for this or for that game mode? Is this setup good? Should I go for another robot instead? So there is one underlying question here, which is there something like a right hangar setup? Or a setup that is adequate for a game mode or a league? The answer is no. Because first and foremost, it depends on what you want to achieve in this game. Do you want to maximize your wins? Maximize your silver? Do you want to have fun? Are you a squad player or a solo player? Do you suffer from lag? And which league are you in? So per definition there cannot be any right setup. So in order to tackle this question correctly, I needed to make some assumptions here. So here they are. I assume that you mostly play solo in team-based game modes, Beacon Rush, Domination or Team Deathmatch. I assume that you want to maximize your amount of wins and performance on the battlefield. I assume that you want to have some fun, and I assume that you're not spending a fortune on this game and that you're not in a competitive high-level pay-to-win clan. So if all of these assumptions are true for you and you're interested in how to set up your hangar, then the rest of this video is for you. So you may ask yourself now, what difference does it make if you spend a fortune on this game or if you're in a competitive pay-to-win clan or not? Well, it's quite simple. If money does not matter and if you strictly go for performance, then you have no reason to go with anything except the latest meta in your hangar. Robots, weapons, drones, microchips, pilots and so on. And the game unfortunately is designed in a way that usually only a handful of builds will perform best on a top level competitive level. In translation this means high level pay to win players have no incentive to go for anything else than maybe 2 or 3 different builds. When I was making this video in July 2022, top players that seek competitiveness have no reason to go for anything else than an optimized Khepri. If you run, let's say, 2 Khepris with cudgels and 3 Khepris with scatters and the right pilots and drones, that's simply the maximum that you can run with regard to performance. And in fact that's really happening. There are barely top pay-to-win players around these days that run less than 3 Khepris. I personally find that a bit sad, but that's just how the game is set up. But for everybody else, I have a suggestion on how to set up your hangar, and it goes as follows. The first robot should be your starting bot and optimized for this role. In my case, that's a Skyros. The second robot should be your lead bot. This is a robot that you love, that is somehow competitive and fun to play. This robot will carry you through the leagues. In my case, that's a Revenant. The third robot should be a tank. This is a robot that can survive on the battlefield for a long time and provide some decent firepower. The fourth robot should be a supporter. This is a robot that can deal a lot of damage but also heal up your teammates. And the fifth robot, let's call it your Joker. This is the robot that you're building at the moment and that will eventually replace one of your 4 other robots. So it will be your next generation starting bot, lead bot, tank or support bot. By the way, for keeping complexity down, I will only look into robots today and leave out the Titan. Also because this is a bit of a separate topic. So let's look at all these roles in a bit more detail, and in the end of the video I will give you a quick example on how you can develop on this. My starting bot is a Skyros. Other typical starting bots these days are the Orochi or the Khepri. I chose the Skyros because I mostly play Beacon Rush these days and because I really like the playstyle. Starting bots should be fast and surviving long. So either they are extremely tanky like the Skyros or the Khepri, or they have abilities that allows them to cap and defend beacons against other starting bots like the Orochi. In any case, your starting bot should always be optimized in order to survive longer than your opponents. Optimization includes modules, drones, microchips, pilots and motherships. In case you only play Team Deathmatch, the idea of the starting bot is a bit different. It does not need to be fast, it needs to provide high range damage and let you survive for a long time on the battlefield. So common starting bots for team deathmatch these days are the Erebus, Behemoths, Sirens, Harpies or also Scorpions. My lead bot is the Havoc Ravana. I have been running this build for a very long time and it's simply fun to run, but not only, it is still competitive even in the highest leagues. So this build is adding some fun factor into my gameplay by adding some raw brawling power. And I'm not planning to replace it anytime soon, rather I try to optimize it further and adjust it to the ever-changing meta. Lead bots are often robots that have unique abilities and that just add some fun factor to the game. My last lead bot before the Ravana was the Invader. Other common lead bots are the Strider, the Hellburner or also the Raven, for example. My tank is the Fenrir with the Bernadette Wolf pilot. It is optimized as a beacon tank, therefore I run brawling weapons on it. If you mostly play team deathmatch, you can also consider to run range weapons on it, for example HMGs. Tanks should always be set up in a way that the amount of health is maximized. As you will often run into other tanks, you should also add at least one layer of damage amplification through microchips or modules. The most common way to do this these days are nuclear amplifiers. Other common tanks besides the Fenrir are the Revenant, the Behemoth or the Khepri. My supporter is the Tremola Khepri. It is not only tanky and fast but can also heal up and buff my teammates and provide 500 meter range damage. This is probably one of the best supporters in the game right now. The Khepri is extremely versatile and even though my Khepri is set up as a range support build, it is more common today to set up support Khepris as brawlers. Supporters can either be optimized as healers, as short range damage supporters or as mid to long range damage supporters. Other common supporters are the Mender, the Typhon, the Erebus, the Harpy or the Siren. My Joker is a Puncher Behemoth. It should usually be a build that I want to make part of my Hangar at a later point. And the idea here is to build a fourth Puncher and eventually replace the Fenrir as a beacon tank. However, as I'm a YouTuber, I commonly use my Joker slot for a build that I want to feature in one of my videos, or for specific builds that I need in order to fulfill certain event tasks. The Joker should always be the build that you are learning how to play and that you focus on for upgrades. So usually the level of this robot and its gear is always a bit below your common gear level in your Hangar. Your starting bot and your lead bot should always be the robots that you have developed furthest. With the lead bot you will have most fun on the battlefield and therefore you will of course bring it very often. And it should perform well. Your starting bot, by definition, you will spawn at the start of each and every battle. So it is important that it has a decent level, because this will eventually affect the resources that you get out of your battles and your team performance in the first minutes of each game. So this concludes my fundamentals of Hangar development. As promised, in the end of this video, I will now show you an example on how you could go ahead in developing these principles if you are a relatively new player to the game. What you want to end up with in the beginning, when you just started out playing war robots, is something like this. Please ignore the level of gear that is shown here, but your gear level should be something between 6 and 7 at this point. What is really important here is that you have unlocked all 5 Hangar slots. This should be the first thing that you save up for when you start with the game. Get these 5000 gold somehow and unlock the 5th slot. Gear is always temporary, but the 5th slot is forever, so you should prioritize this. Then you may have a configuration that looks a bit like this. Again, this is just an example. A Cossack with ECU shield as a starting bot, a Griffin as lead bot, a Leo as a tank, a Natasha as supporter, and you may have just gotten a Lancelot from somewhere and you're leveling it up for eventually replacing the Leo as a tank. So let's fast forward a couple of months, then your Hangar may look like this, for example. You decided to buy a Stalker because you were sick that your Cossack dies so quickly, so this is your new starting bot. You still have the Griffin, it's still your lead bot, but you have started looking into getting the Raven somehow because it can only get better. Your Lancelot has replaced the Leo because you found it more effective as beacon tank and you got some fancy weapons too. The Natasha is still rocking as mid-range supporter with some energy machine guns that you got out of chests, and your new Joker is a Mender. You loved the concept of healing, you just got the Mender and started to build some weapons for it. And eventually it will become your new supporter or maybe even your new lead bot, who knows. Finally, one more remark on a question that I also tend to get quite often. Is it worth to buy additional Hangars? The short answer is no. Simply because at this stage of the game, maintaining more than one Hangar is simply unaffordable for everyday players. So that concludes my first episode of War Robots Basics. I hope that you found this concept useful for developing your own Hangar. Thanks for watching and see you on my channel.